Welcome to another video, guys. I'm Kris05, and today I'll give you a Hearthstone Legend guide, and more importantly, how to play like a Hearthstone pro. There are a lot of guides for Legend, but in this video I will not be telling you to play meta decks or drink water or other trivial stuff, but instead I will give you 5 exact things on which you can focus on so you can start playing like a real Hearthstone pro. Feel free to use the bar on the bottom so you can freely move between the tips. Hope you enjoy the video, and if you do, a like would be appreciated, and so will a subscribe. Now, let's get into it. The first thing I always make sure I teach people I coach the Legend is minion positioning and minion prioritization. This simple concept can definitely improve your board state and can protect you from your opponent's answers. The reason why board positioning is so important nowadays is the high number of rogues on ladder as well as the high number of Highlander decks on there. The main spell you should be thinking about when playing against those is Betrayal, but you should also be thinking about Explosive Shot against those Highlander decks as well as the Turncoat Contract from Unidentified Contract. Warrior also has access to ramming speed too. Before you say, well sure, but nobody is running those, I'd like to remind you that although you're right, with the tons of discovering spells and discovering minions and Zephrys, you should almost never feel too safe from those, so I would always advise you to try and position yourself better against possibilities like that. An oversimplified strategy here would be to put the big dudes on the left or most right side and put small minions in the middle as a buffer. Stealth minions and untargetable minions also serve as a good middle buffer, but keep in mind that the big minion on the side can still be targeted. Overall, that would be the defensive aspect of positioning, but now let's talk about the aggressive aspect. When playing a Faceless Lackey, always try to position it on the left side of a minion that is able to attack this turn. The reasoning behind that is the possibility of getting a Direwolf Alpha. That +1 damage can be the difference between removing a minion or not. And the last aspect of this tip is prioritization. When figuring out which minion you need to be trading, and they're all seemingly the same stats, you should go for the one that has a tribe, synergy, or costs more. When the opponent has a 1/1 Wisp on the board and a Lackey, you should prioritize the Lackey, since there are quite a few cards that synergize with those. If your opponent has a Wisp and a Novice Engineer, you go for the Engineer, because it costs more and it can be evolved into a free drop instead of a 2. What I'm trying to say is, leave the Wisps. Same goes for your board, but in the opposite direction. If you're looking for a minion to trade into your opponent's board, or to transform with the Faceless Corruptor, use the minion that has no tribe or is cheaper, and so on. Now let's move down to the next step. Figure out your turn before you start playing it, and know your priorities. We are all guilty of not planning our entire turns before we start throwing cards from time to time. I get it, it's a lot easier to throw that minion or hero power as soon as you realize you want to be using it that turn, but that will often cost you an advantage or an opportunity for such. What I'm trying to say is, you always want to be using the cards that generate cards for you or draw you a new card before you actually commit to your turn, as long as you know you will be using those generating cards. I'm not saying you should always draw or generate a card as soon as you have a possibility to do that. But if you know you will be using that card on that turn, you might as well use that first so you get the full information before you commit to your final play. For instance, always drop your Faceless Lackey on the board first before you drop your other minions on the board, for the slim chance of getting a Doomsayer out of there. Also, using it first to see if you're gonna get a rush or a charge minion can save you from using a removal spell, for instance. Same goes for randomly generated cards from lackeys, other minions, or spells, and so on. Figure out your entire turn first, discover or draw, reevaluate, and then commit to your play, and this way you will have a lot more well-organized turns in the future. Another cool tip for some next level play is hand tracking. For hand tracking, you can start doing that even in the mulligan phase, before the game has actually started. If you pay close attention to your opponent's hand, you will actually notice you can see when he hovers over his cards. For instance, if you see your opponent is not hovering over his first card, you could assume that is a quest deck, if there is a quest archetype for that class at the moment. If you see him hovering over all of his cards, then he probably will have a fully random mulligan. If you see him not hovering over any of his cards, expect him to have a perfect mulligan against you, and so on. Keep in mind your opponent can use this tip against you for your hand as well. So if you're in fact playing a quest deck, you might even consider hovering over your first card a few times just to get him off track. Hovering over a few times over your complete hand can also give your opponent a lot of wrong signals, so you might consider doing that as well. Just keep in mind that sometimes you don't really see all of the opponent's hoverings, so sometimes you might see him hovering only his first and third card, but in fact he did a full mulligan. but most of the times you will have a good idea of how many cards your opponent has changed before you actually see it. Once the game actually starts, Hearthstone Deck Tracker will be of great help for you to track how many cards your opponent has changed, or if he has discovered a card, or for how long he has kept a card. If you see for instance that a rogue has kept a card in his mulligan from turn 1 and now you're at turn 5, you can expect that to be a Galakrond. If a mage did that, it's probably gonna be a Reno, and so on. If you're using Hearthstone Deck Tracker, you should notice that your opponent's cards have numbers, letters, or symbols. M means that he has changed, aka mulligan that card, 0 means he kept it in his mulligan, and 1, 2, 3 and so on is the turn on which he has drawn that card. There's also the randomly generated symbol, which is a little purple present, and there's also the return minion symbol, which is a backward arrow. This helps you have a better idea of what's happening in your opponent's hand, so you can use that information to your advantage. Now let's talk about bluffing and giving your opponent information. The bluffing aspect of this tip comes down to your hand and what information you give your opponent, or more like pretend to give to your opponent. The fake mulligan hover is also a good example here, but what you can also be doing is pretend you're gonna be playing a card that you have no intentions of playing that turn. I noticed this in a tournament I casted on my last stream with Draco Cat, and I was pretty impressed. But the mage just has too much bamboozle potential. What?
That's what I was saying, like, is he gonna use Innervate?
What? By the way, Deathwing hovering over with the Innervate and the board, could we possibly consider that as a bluff?
That isn't interesting.
I have literally never thought of that. And I'm mildly ashamed.
That's an interesting concept. Like, so you think he was potentially trying to make Kitty to think that he is holding a Savage Roar or something like that?
Well,
that
not
he was
Savage Roar, because it was a completely frozen board, but maybe a exotic Mount Seller or something like that. Is he gonna pop the Lackey here, though? Did you see how he targeted his own minion, pretending that was a taunt?
Deathwing is definitely bluffing the opponent.
Yeah,
you know what I
he's
mean?
doing that. That was not an accident. That's the second time he does that with this deck, by the way. The player Deathwing showed a beautiful example of such a bluff on the tournament finals, hovering over an Innervate on turn 10, pretending to have Soul of the Forest, Ironbark, or Overflow for instance. It's a very interesting concept that actually gives you something to do even when your hand is complete garbage. I'm not saying you're gonna become top 1 legend with this tip, but it's definitely something to think about. You can do this in a lot of different ways, especially with lackeys. You can pretend you have a Kobold lackey by dragging a Titanic lackey over your opponent's minions and not playing it. There are a lot of possibilities, so don't underestimate it. The more important thing here that will actually matter a lot more to your opponent is you actually giving him information that you don't want him to have. What I mean here is the game only allows you to drag cards like that on the board only if you're able to play them on that turn. For instance, you cannot drag Alexstrasza on the board on turn 1 since you don't have 9 mana. However, you can drag a backstab on your opponent's minions, and he will notice that, especially if you're at 0 mana, so he will pretty much know for a fact that you have backstab in your hand and might reconsider playing a high value minion like Satire for instance, before he can bait out your backstab. Also know that you can't really make the targeting arrow appear for your opponent if you're using a minion that doesn't really have a battle cry or a spell that doesn't really target anything. It has to be something that could actually target for the arrow to appear for your opponent. Next up is a cool little feature that can save you a lot of time from HS Deck Tracker, the board attack counter. If you've dropped by my stream on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday or Sunday, see what I did there? You might have noticed that I have a little circle next to my hero power and to my opponent's hero power. This is the so-called board attack counter, which does a great job of counting the board damage for you and for your opponent. This can save you a lot of time, and you won't have to waste time counting your minion damage, but instead you can use that time to plan out your turn. This is especially valuable for rogue decks, since you really have a lot of things to consider each turn, and losing 5 to 10 seconds to count your board damage is not a luxury you can often take. Being able to pinpoint if you're in danger of your opponent's lethal next turn is also pretty useful, and all you have to do to activate that feature is to click a few ticks. You fire up HS Deck Tracker, go to Options, and under General you will see Player and Opponent. For your board attack counter, go to Player and tick it, and same goes for your opponent too. As easy as that. Just don't get baited by rush minions, cause sometimes that might bait you into thinking you have lethal, but in fact that would be damage, but not for the face. We already talked about planning your whole turn before you start executing it, but you should also be thinking for the next turns too, where the next tip comes in. thinking a few turns ahead. This is especially important for your first 3 or 4 turns, where games usually play pretty much as expected. When you're doing your mulligan, you should really be thinking of what you want to be doing in your first few turns, and what your opponent might want to be doing in his turns, and what you can get to help you with that. For instance, you might want to be thinking of keeping a free drop, but if your deck has a lot of good free drops you can top deck, you might be better off dumping it for the chance to get a better 1 and 2 drop for the first turns, since you will be drawing quite a few other cards till the turn 3 actually comes. Other than that, you should also be thinking of how you can be using your cards for the next turns too. For example, if you have 2 1-drops for turn 2 and a 2-drop, you might prefer dropping the 2-drop on turn 2, so you have a more flexible turn 3 where you can drop a 1-drop and a hero power as a worst case scenario. Another thing is managing your hand size, which is pretty important for Galakrond Rogue nowadays. A lot of the times you will actually have 4 Invokes and Galakrond waiting in your hand for turn 7, but you will not be able to drop him due to poor hand management. Being able to predict such scenarios and actually not comboing Miscreant for instance can help you drop Galakrond on 7 a lot more often. Recognizing how you can deplete your hand and not replacing one card with another with a Pharaoh Cat for instance is very important too. I can't really cover every aspect of turn planning for every deck, but as long as you think about it, you should be able to figure out what you need to be doing for your particular deck. And the last aspect of the game I want to talk about in this video is overextending. I know it feels amazing dropping Alexstrasza with both her dragons on turn 9. I know it's cool throwing all those 0 mana minions with the Galakrond you do on turn 7 too, and a Big Eddie ain't no joke either, but a lot of the times that would be considered as overextending. You have to realize when you actually have benefit of doing that, and when you will just need the usual board clear or silence. A lot of the times it would be better for you to just use a portion of your resources to bait out your opponent's board clears and push with the others after that. It's up to you to figure out when is the right time to go all in, but be mindful of the possible counterplays your opponent might do. This also goes both ways because you have to know when your opponent is actually holding off to his all in. Be careful how you use your removals and hold on to the big guns for the actual big board your opponent might be planning for you. Anyway, that's gonna be it for this video guys. I hope this helps you get into the pro player mentality and you start winning more games. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe if you're new. Thanks for watching, I'm Kris05 and I'll see you in my next video or stream.